Some crimes are solved with DNA. Some are cracked with a confession. And then there are cases so cold, so impossibly frozen in time, that only a microscopic twitch of a human eyelid can unlock the truth. This is the story of a killer who committed the perfect murder. He left no fingerprints, no witnesses, no motive the police could find. For years, he walked free, believing he had outsmarted everyone, but he didn't account for the one thing he couldn't control: his own body. In a police interrogation room, under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights, he made a mistake so small that 99.9% of people would never have noticed it. But the one person who did notice it was the person who mattered most. A detective who refused to give up. This is the story of how a single blink exposed a cold-blooded murderer and finally brought justice to a family who had waited over a decade for answers. Let's go back to where it all began. Imagine a quiet suburban neighborhood in the American Midwest, the kind of place where people leave their front doors unlocked and kids play outside until the streetlights flicker on. It was a warm summer evening in July 2004. The sun was just starting to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Inside a modest two-story home, a young woman named Melissa Turner was getting ready for bed. She was 28 years old, a beloved third-grade teacher, a devoted wife, a soon-to-be mother. That last detail is the most heartbreaking part of this story. Melissa was 7 months pregnant with a baby girl she had already decided to name Lily. Her husband, David, was away on a business trip. He had called her just a few hours earlier to say goodnight. He told her he loved her. He told her he couldn't wait to see her the next day. That phone call would be the last time he ever heard her voice. The following morning, David tried calling Melissa. No answer. He sent a text. No reply. At first, he wasn't overly concerned. He thought maybe she was just tired. Maybe she had gone out for a walk. But as the hours ticked by with total silence, a knot of dread began to tighten in his stomach. He called a neighbor and asked her to check on Melissa. What that neighbor found would haunt the entire community forever. The front door was slightly ajar. The living room was in disarray, furniture knocked over, a lamp shattered on the floor. And then, in the bedroom, a scene of unspeakable horror. Melissa was gone, but the violence left behind told a clear and terrifying story. There was blood. There were signs of a desperate struggle. It looked like someone had broken in and dragged her from her home. Police were called immediately. An Amber Alert was issued for Melissa, but with no suspect vehicle, no description of an abductor. They were operating completely in the dark. The investigation moved at a furious pace. Detectives swarmed the house, looking for anything that could point them toward Melissa. They dusted for fingerprints. They collected DNA samples. They interviewed every neighbor within a 3-block radius. But it was as if a ghost had committed the crime. There were no signs of forced entry, which suggested Melissa may have known her attacker. But who would want to harm a beloved schoolteacher with no known enemies? The case went cold faster than anyone wanted to admit. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. David Turner, a man destroyed by grief, went on local news begging for information. His face, gaunt and hollow, became a haunting fixture on television screens. He promised a reward. He pleaded with the public. But the silence was deafening. Behind the scenes, the police had a suspect. They just couldn't prove it. The suspect was a man named Peter Vance. He was a maintenance worker who had done some repairs at the Turner home a few weeks before Melissa disappeared. He had a minor criminal record, some petty theft, a bar fight, but he had no history of violence against women. He had no obvious motive. When detectives brought him in for questioning early on, he was calm. He was cooperative. He said he had been at home alone the night of the disappearance. His story was simple and unshakable. With no physical evidence linking him to the scene, the police had to let him walk. But one detective refused to let go. His name was Detective Mark Stabler. He was an old-school cop with tired eyes and an instinct he trusted more than any piece of forensic evidence. He believed Peter Vance was lying. He could feel it in his bones. For 11 years, Detective Stabler kept the case file on his desk. It gathered dust, but he never boxed it up. Every few months, he would pull out the crime scene photos. He would read over the interview transcripts. He would stare at Peter Vance's face in the old booking photo, looking for something he had missed. 11 years. That's a long time to carry a weight like that. A long time to tell a grieving husband that you still have no answers. But Detective Stabler never gave up. And then, in 2015, he got the break he had been praying for. A new technique in behavioral analysis had emerged. It was called micro-expression training. It focused on involuntary facial expressions that flash across a person's face in a fraction of a second. Expressions that are impossible to fake. Expressions that reveal a person's true emotions before their brain can censor them. Detective Stabler became obsessed. He studied under some of the top experts in the field. He watched thousands of hours of interrogation footage, learning to read the hidden language of the human face. He realized that if he could re-interview Peter Vance with a hidden high-definition camera, he might finally catch something that the old cameras had missed. Something invisible to the naked eye. Something buried deep in the suspect's soul. It took months to arrange. The department was skeptical. They didn't want to fund a fishing expedition based on a hunch, but Detective Stabler was relentless. Finally, they agreed to let him bring Peter Vance in for a voluntary conversation under the guise of reviewing some old case details. It wasn't an arrest. It wasn't even a formal interrogation. It was just two men sitting in a gray room talking. But this time, there was a brand new camera mounted in the corner. It recorded at a frame rate high enough to capture the most fleeting of human reactions. Peter Vance walked into that room with the same smug confidence he had worn for over a decade. He was older now. His hair was thinner. His face was lined. But his attitude was completely unchanged. He sat down, leaned back in his chair, and smiled at the detective. He thought this was going to be a waste of time. He thought he was untouchable. For the first hour, Detective Stabler kept the conversation light. They talked about the weather. They talked about sports. They talked about Peter's new job at a hardware store. The whole time, Detective Stabler was watching Peter's face on a hidden monitor being monitored by another expert in the next room. They were looking for a baseline. How does Peter blink when he's relaxed? How does his mouth twitch when he's telling the truth about mundane things? They were mapping the geography of his face so they could spot the lies when they finally came. And then, Detective Stabler changed his tone. He leaned forward. He lowered his voice. He slid a photograph across the metal table. It was a picture of Melissa Turner, smiling, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. Peter Vance glanced at it. Nothing. No visible reaction. Then Detective Stabler said words that changed everything. He said, "We found her body, Peter. We found Melissa. We're running DNA tests right now. It's only a matter of time." Now here's what you need to understand. Melissa Turner's body had not been found. Even after 11 years, she was still missing. Detective Stabler was bluffing. He was using a carefully constructed lie to trigger a response. And it worked. On the surface, Peter Vance kept his composure. He said he didn't know what the detective was talking about. He said he was innocent. But the high-speed camera captured something his conscious mind couldn't stop. At the exact moment Detective Stabler said, "We found her body," Peter Vance blinked. But it wasn't a normal blink. A normal human blink lasts about 100 to 150 milliseconds. Peter Vance's blink in that fraction of a second was different. His eyes closed, and then, for a split moment, they squeezed tight. It was a micro-expression known as a full eye closure, and it was over in less than half a second. In the world of behavioral analysis, this specific type of involuntary blink is a massive red flag. It's an unconscious blocking mechanism. The brain, upon hearing a threat, triggers the eyes to shut tight in an attempt to block out reality. It's the body's way of saying, "I don't want to see this. I don't want to be here." An innocent man hearing that a missing woman's body had been found would likely show surprise. His eyes would widen. He might even show hope or relief that a family might finally get closure. But a guilty man, a man who knew exactly where that body was buried, would have a completely different subconscious reaction. He would want to disappear. And for just one blink, Peter Vance disappeared. The expert in the next room saw it instantly. He leaned into his microphone and whispered into Detective Stabler's hidden earpiece. "He just blocked. Full eye closure. He's your guy. Push him." Detective Stabler felt his heart slam against his ribs. After 11 years, he finally had something. It wasn't DNA. It wasn't a confession. It was just a blink. But he knew it was the crack he needed. He leaned even closer to Peter. He started describing details of the imaginary crime scene. He talked about the condition of the body. He talked about the evidence they had supposedly recovered. With every new piece of false information, Peter Vance's face betrayed him. His blink rate skyrocketed. His lips tightened into a thin white line. These were all signs of extreme internal stress. The mask was crumbling. Finally, after 2 hours of relentless pressure, Peter Vance made a fatal mistake. He asked a question. He said, "Did you find the necklace too?" The room went silent. Detective Stabler's blood ran cold. He had never mentioned a necklace. The police had never released information about a necklace. The only person who knew about a missing necklace was the killer. David Turner had told police that Melissa always wore a small gold locket. It had a picture of her grandmother inside. She never took it off. It wasn't valuable in terms of money, but it was priceless to her. When her body was never found, the locket vanished with her. The public never knew about it. The media never reported on it. Peter Vance had just placed himself at the scene of the crime. He had just admitted to seeing Melissa Turner's body. Detective Stabler looked at the camera. He looked back at Peter, who had suddenly gone pale as he realized the words that had just slipped out of his mouth. The blinking had opened the door. The question about the necklace slammed it shut behind him. Peter Vance broke down. The tears came. Not tears of remorse, but tears of defeat. He knew the game was over. Over the next several hours, he gave a full confession. He told them how he had gone to the Turner house that night to confront Melissa about a dispute over his payment for the repair work. An argument escalated. He struck her. She fell and hit her head on the corner of a table. She was still alive, but he panicked. He thought his life was over if she called the police. So he made a monstrous decision to silence her forever. He drove her body over 100 miles away and buried her in a shallow grave in a densely wooded area. He had kept the location a secret for 11 years, visiting the site periodically to make sure no one had disturbed it. He led police to that very spot. They dug through the cold, hard earth. And there, after over a decade of unanswered prayers, they finally found Melissa Turner. The evidence was overwhelming, but the trial would always be remembered for one thing: the blink. The jury watched the high-definition interrogation video. They saw the moment Detective Stabler bluffed about finding the body. They saw Peter Vance's eyes squeeze shut for a fraction of a second. Expert witnesses took the stand and explained the science of microexpressions. They taught the jury that while you can control your words and even control your smile, you cannot control the instinctive flinch of your eyelids when your worst nightmare comes true. The defense tried to get the video thrown out. They argued it was junk science. They argued it was a trick of the light. But the question about the necklace was on tape. That wasn't science. That was guilt spilling out of a man's mouth because his brain was too exhausted to keep the secret anymore. Peter Vance was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. David Turner finally got to bring his wife home. He held a proper funeral for Melissa and for the unborn daughter he never got to meet. He placed that tiny gold locket on a chain around his own neck, and he has never taken it off. It's unsettling to think about how close Peter Vance came to getting away with murder. 11 years is a long time. Generations grow up. Memories fade. Case files get shoved into storage lockers. If Detective Mark Stabler had retired, if he had given up, if he had stopped believing in his gut feeling about that smug, untouchable maintenance man, this story would have a very different ending. It would be an ending where a killer dies of old age, surrounded by family, while a good man wears a locket around his neck and still whispers questions into the empty air. But that's not what happened. Instead, justice came in the form of a fraction of a second, a muscle spasm, an involuntary scream from the subconscious mind that said, "I did it," without making a sound. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What secrets are hiding in the faces of the people you see every day? What truths are being held captive behind the eyes of someone you trust? We all think we're good at reading people. We think we know when someone is lying. But the truth is, we miss the clues constantly. They flash by in the blink of an eye, literally. The only difference is, most of us aren't looking. But Detective Stabler was. Thank you for watching this video, all the way to the end. If this story gave you chills, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another deep dive into the darkest corners of true crime. We have a lot more cases where the smallest detail cracked the biggest mystery. And I want to know what you think. Would you have noticed the blink? Do you believe micro-expressions are the future of criminal investigation? Or do you think it's too unreliable to be used in court? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and never underestimate the power of a single tiny detail. I'll see you in the next video.